Hey everybody and good morning. My name is Joseph Sanfilippo and I am the Director of eLearning for Tech. Today we're going to talk about things to consider as you are planning your virtual graduation and other ceremonies. Along with me I have Robert Wayne Harris.
Hello everyone, I'm Robert Wayne Harris. I'm the Chief Learning Officer for Tech. I'm also a former Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction and a former Superintendent of Schools in Long Island, New York.
So our conversation today, as I mentioned, is going to be around things to consider for virtual graduations. Let's go to our screen and begin. So just some housekeeping tips for everyone. We want to make sure that you are muting your microphone. We are going to go through, we will have time for questions at the end, but throughout our session, please ensure you maintain muting your microphone. Next is while there is a chat box and we're encouraging you to do that, there will be a question form. This will be a Google form popped into the chat box. As we are expecting a lot of attendees today, we may miss the questions in the chat. We are going to do a live Q&A at the end, so we will get to as many questions put into this question form as possible. Note that we are recording this session, so it will be available for you at another time to review, or if you did not come today, so you are not here now, so that's a message for people in the future. However, if your camera's on and we go to the Teams stream, you will be seen. So if you don't want to be seen, make sure you're turning your camera off as well, because we are recording. Something I did not write in here is to pin our video. If you see this screen right now, you can right-click on it, and you could press the pin option, which looks like a push pin. That'll make it large for everyone, or large for you, just so you can see us and it's not bouncing around other people. That may be helpful. So here we go.
Hey, Joseph, real quick before you get started, and tech team, I think the form for questions needs permission. So if that's on the TEQ side, if you could just open that up.
Sure, we are taking care of that. I got Joe Q.
Perfect.
It's done already,
Thanks
so
so
if we refresh it, it should be good. It probably was our domain only. So thank you, Christina. Feel free to interrupt with those kind of things because I definitely need that help. So again,
no worries.
Mute your microphone. We'll do things like this and we'll be good. So let's talk about our agenda. So the things that we're going to cover today are things to consider. We're going to look at a checklist of questions that, as a former administrator for a school myself and a former administrator that Robert was, questions that him and I put together and thought about if we were planning a virtual graduation. Or any type of ceremony. At no point do we think this is the end all. We do think there are lots of options out there, but we hope that these ideas and practical examples are good for you, of something that you can take back and work on and explore on your own. So we're going to talk about organizing the team, so who is involved, the types of celebrations, recorded options, so what can I do pre-recorded, live streaming options and technical specifications, so different tools that I could use to stream out to everyone, setting the stage, so what am I broadcasting, and then what kind of things go on a typical graduation or ceremony program, and how can I replace those with some kind of virtual option. Now remember, I'm going to give you a lot of options. You don't have to do everything, but you need to do some things. So here we go first. Let's go look at my computer. I'm going to look at the graduation checklist. So this is in the agenda document I provided. I got a Google Doc version and a PDF version. You feel free to copy it, to download it, and it's just the questions that I'm going through today. You know, the questions that we asked ourselves. I gave you a little space to type your own answers, but as you plan it, are you going to answer all these questions? Maybe, maybe not. Are you going to have other questions arise from these? Absolutely. It's just the baseline. So for example, the first question is, who will be planning? I could change that right now. Who will be planning, organizing, and delivering the virtual ceremony? So after today, I suggest you go to this, you use this, and you work with your team to figure out what works best for you. So back to our presentation. All right. First, organizing the team. Who will be involved? So I'm going to ask Robert, who would be involved if you were planning, organizing, and delivering a virtual graduation?
Very good question, Joseph. And similar to any other function at your school, particularly moving up ceremonies and graduations, you definitely have to have your administration involved, your school principal, assistant principal, your faculty and teachers, maybe those who sponsor the class, as well as teachers who would be involved in the overall orchestration of the graduation. You definitely want to include your PTAs and your parents, those that would be involved in supporting their children and the children throughout the school. You need their input about how to actually present students, whether you're going to be sharing names and things of that nature. And also, you need technology, your tech support team, your IT team. This is going to be important in any virtual graduation or virtual situation. They're going to be there to troubleshoot and help to assist with the program as it moves forward.
That's excellent. That's exactly what we think, it's that kind of committee to put together. And that technical support is a key aspect because a lot of this rides on the technical capabilities that you have and that your community has. So even thinking about who's going to organize or create this slideshow, a person needs those skills on how to use iMovie, Flipgrid, or whatever tools you choose. And a thing that I do want to point out is maybe you want to consult outside sources for professional development from either DAIT, EdTech team, a company like us, Tech, of how to use things like YouTube live stream, Microsoft Teams, iMovie, or all of these options that you can get to, because you're going to need to build that and create it yourself. And there's lots of resources out there. You are not the only people doing this, so you can always take the lead from others. Something that was mentioned last night that I at a meeting I went to, people were talking about how New York and the Northeast in general is a little bit later in graduations than a lot of the rest of the country. So we get to learn what other graduations and places are doing in the Southwest, the Southeast, and things like that. So you can, you get more ideas that way. It's sometimes great to be first. Also, it's great to have people do it before you. Things like that. And use any district resources that you have for question support and things like that. And we'll talk about some of those resources as we go along. So let's think about this. Robert, at the end of the year, what are some things that you would be celebrating at your school or district?
Again, very great question. It's probably the most memorable time of the school year. So you not only have your moving up ceremonies and your graduations, which are your commencement activities, but there are things such as sports awards, honor society awards, other types of awards that you give out to students. And these are things that you also may want to consider creating a virtual environment for. You also may want to involve your students to the extent possible, particularly with your older students, in planning this program out as well, because not only are they going to be the ones that are going to benefit, but also they have a sense of technology today, and they will be able to assist in how better to present these programs as well.
So my next question for you, Robert, is who would be the audience you are trying to target?
And your audience, again, similar to any other function, your faculty, of course, your students, your parents, your school community. I like to say everyone that would be involved in supporting your students, celebrating their success, you want to make sure that you involve in the program as well.
So another thing to think about, and we will speak about this a little bit later, but I'm going to ask you very quickly, what type of privacy concerns you may have, or how would you handle that?
That's a very important question. In terms of privacy concerns, particularly with a virtual environment, you want to make sure that either you have a media consent form or some sort of student release form. Remember that you're going to be using sometimes student names as well as student pictures. It would be a greater concern, of course, with your elementary school and middle school students who may not have a digital footprint. Your high school students, you still would need consent if they're under the age of 18. But many of them maybe already have a digital footprint, such as a Facebook profile or Instagram or something of that nature. But you still want to have those protections in place for you, your school, your students, and their families as well.
The last question I think about this for what is your end goal, and I'll answer it myself, is will this be a broadcasted event or recorded or potentially some type of mix of both? Now, we're going to go through some options of what that means. So for example, today we're doing something live for you guys, but this would be recorded for you to watch another day. You can always just pre-record something and then play it later, or record something and send it out to the community, your faculty, and your parents and students for them to watch on their own time. So let's go back to my presentation and talk more about those digital consent forms. So, as Robert mentioned, you do need photo release. We would want you to check with your district on the protocol. In this presentation and in the agenda, there is the link to the NYC DOE media consent form. That is absolutely what you could use. It has multiple languages for it. However, it is all PDF, and you would have to work with either DIT or EdTech to convert to digital as needed, potentially creating it as a form to make that a required checkbox. Hey, by filling out this form or checking this box, I give consent to use that. And when you provide this to your parents, maybe tell them exactly what type of information you're going to share. And you could decide it might be a likeness of your student as an avatar. It might be an actual picture of your student. It might be a video of your student, or cover all bases. So once you get to that end game, you have a little bit of everything. If your school is managing a website or a social media for that school as well, you should have this anyway, because you may be using your students in promotional videos about your school, on your school website, and things like that. And then I'll talk about this a little again, and this is important. Have a plan for students with and without consent. So, you might do everything exactly the right way. You might send it out. A parent might say, no, I don't give you consent, and that's okay. You have to have a plan for that if it's a silhouette picture or something like that. But also, we want to make sure that you have, what if a parent just never fills out the consent form? So just there's one thing about them saying no, it's one thing about you might just not get it, and that's okay. You just want to make sure that you have a plan both ways. So I'm going to talk about some recorded options here. And what I mean by that is this is something I pre-recorded, and there are so many tools to do this. You've seen a lot of ideas being thrown around. You can use that chat box to share some ideas you have, or even using that question form if you want to share some ideas of what you've seen. I'll be happy to read them off towards the end of the session. So what are some things that we can pre-record? So I've seen faculty tributes for students, saying, hey, well-wishing, whether they're saying it, they're clapping, or they're holding up a sign that they drew. That's something very popular. I think a lot of people have seen the "We Miss You" type things as well, those videos that were created towards the early part of this. Maybe a student message. So, hey, this is where I'm going, this is who I am, things of that nature. Again, or a student tribute to the school. This is a culmination of potentially years of success. You might have seen on social media the throw a cap challenge. So of course, if the students have a graduation cap that you were able to provide already, or can safely provide it to them, having a video of them throwing it in the air, or getting a video of that somehow, using things like that you could pre-record. Recording your commencement speech. So you can record it, and we'll talk about that later, but using an already recorded one. This Saturday, the 44th President, Barack Obama, is doing a YouTube stream for a commencement speech of all graduates. So maybe that's something you want to share to your community. There's also a podcast that's free for iHeartRadio that has all musicians such as John Legend, as well as philanthropists, Elon Musk, Tim Cook, business leaders, and so many people are creating commencement speeches for students in 2020. So there's lots of resources out there. One of my favorite ones is the family shout-outs. And I know one of the things we talk about is, hold your applause to the end, and parents love getting that grab, bringing their shakers and their bells and ringing for their student, their family member, their cousin. Well, having them create a video for part of this tribute, just kind of, again, not just their own, but for all of the graduates or people like that. And Rob will add to that as well.
And I just want to add to this by saying, and principals, teachers, faculty, you know this well, always plan for the unpredictable. Having pre-recorded content is always best. In my experience, supervising graduation programs, moving up programs, students sometimes can surprise you. Many of you may be aware of that. And so having something pre-recorded that you can review, edit, to ensure that there's integrity, no one is embarrassed. And students like to do some fun things sometimes, and it may not be appropriate in this environment, particularly a virtual environment where this is going to be recorded and memorialized for life.
That's an excellent point. So that's where the pre-recorded options, even though you could be broadcasting you live, it gives you that review period beforehand, editing, and to really bring all things together. Because you may have 100, 200, 500, 1,000 students in scenarios. So you want to be able to bring that together ahead of time. When you do ask for those pre-recording things, give examples, give templates, give criteria, just like we're giving an assignment to students, and it could be something fun for them. As well, I say, students can be creative in positive ways as well as negative ways. So there's so many recording tools. You can do this with any recording software. Think the lowest common denominator for your families, your students, things like that. Maybe they can just send you a video on a phone. How are they going to turn in that video? Are they going to use something like Google Classroom, Dropbox? What makes the most sense? Of course, there's other recording softwares and video editing softwares such as iMovie. I've seen a bunch of good examples for Flipgrid, or it doesn't have to be video at all. It could only be audio in a podcast using something like Soundtrap or GarageBand, or even voice memos on a phone. We are all blessed in this time to have so many options to use with this kind of digital material. You just gotta pick the things you're gonna go with, see other examples, create and provide examples, and make what works. One option may not be the end for all of your families and students, but you may find a couple. You just don't want to have to use everything, because it's when you start drinking from that fire hose and go through all the examples, you're trying to do too much. So the next thing I'll talk about, and sorry, I just want to erase this a little bit, is live streaming. So of course, you can just record and provide anything out to families and however you want to do that. But you can also live stream events, and there's lots of places to live stream events. But think about, what do you need first? You need some kind of one-way video and audio feed. That means people are not able to talk back and forth. You don't have to keep unmuting microphones. But great, a chat box and things like that are absolutely useful. You're going to need an internet connection, you're going to need some kind of web camera, and you're going to need some kind of lighting to making sure that you're not standing in front of a window. Everyone has had that video conference call with someone with the windows behind them and they look very dark and washed out. So when you're recording and streaming things, lighting is important. How will people access? So again, we talk about how we're going to pass it out via calendar, invite, newsletter. Well, what are you going to make them join a Facebook group to see the live stream? Are you going to give them a YouTube link? Or are they going to use something where they need a login, such as Google Meet or Microsoft Teams? All options have pros and cons, so you need to explore and figure out which ones are the best for you. So some of the technical options, and we'll just go to the screen so it's a little bit bigger for everyone. Some of the technical options, and this is not all of the technical options of these, but I want you to be aware of them. So things like Microsoft Teams Live or Google Meet Live do have a participant size, so you really got to think about that. If you are able to record it, do you want to be able to record it? Of course. And we will talk more about translations, but some offer them live, some don't. You could use Microsoft Translate across anything. It just takes a little bit more. All options I put here, and these are not the only options to stream, and these are just some things, do have some kind of closed captioning. But what I want to speak about most is the privacy, or what you should go to. So think about what you can limit to. So Microsoft Teams and Google Meets may limit to domains. So that's good or bad, because your family members, aunts and uncles, cousins are not going to have a domain, an account in your domain for them. And also there's limitations on Microsoft Teams and Google Meet of how many live streams can be going on at the same time. So for example, the limit is about 20. So if more than 20 schools are trying to live stream at the same time using the same domain, they would not be able to do it. I know in a district with 1,800 to 1,900 schools, the odds could be good. So we want to make sure that you're using something that works. So like YouTube does have private options. It doesn't mean anyone can't access it. It just means it doesn't show up in a search. Facebook is another option, and maybe you want to limit to people that follow a page or follow a group or a part of an event. But again, that's another layer. That means they have to follow that, and you have to get them to follow that page or the group. Whatever you do, create clear and concise instructions. Before I get the translation options, there are advanced streaming options as well. Again, you can get as advanced or as simple as you want. So you've seen our broadcast today where we have things like lower thirds where our names came out, and you've seen that, maybe a title, slide, typical things you see in broadcasts. That could be done with a free software called Open Broadcast Studio. You're also able to have multiple sources, so multiple camera angles, multiple audio angles. It makes it fairly easy to play these pre-recorded things because you're setting them up as video sources. However, there is a learning curve on how to use it. So you want to make sure that maybe someone knows how to use it, or maybe it's something they want to get into. If you watched anything, people like streaming to YouTube or Facebook Live over the last few weeks with those kind of streams, that's most likely what they're using. Also, there are websites such as Restream and Lula that allow you to stream to multiple locations at the same time. So when I was speaking before, let's say we wanted to stream to both Facebook Live and YouTube. I would need 2 devices and 2 cameras to do that, unless I use something like Restream and Lula, and that allows me to stream to multiple sources. So this little icon right here, it's what I'm doing. Could go to Twitch, Facebook, YouTube. They have hundreds of places they will actually stream to. You can stream to them all. There are free and paid options. But if you are trying to give more access, so some people would come from Facebook, some people would come from YouTube, you do have that option. But again, more advanced, and you're going to have to make sure you know how to do it. I also want to talk about accessibility for a quick moment. Obviously, we live in a very diverse city that represents lots of different cultures, languages, and people. So there are a variety of translator and other tools you can use. So for example, there are New York City DOE interpretation services and translation requests that you could fill out. If you do want them to translate instructions that you're going to send out, make sure that you give the services ample time to do that. So if you need it tomorrow, don't give it today. Give a couple weeks ahead of time. That's the planning and organization. You can use a tool like Microsoft Translator for live translating, but when you do that, you want to make sure you speak slow and speak clearly, because how you speak for subtitles and things like that will matter of your cadence, as well as using relative terms, idioms, and things of that nature. Typically, commencement speeches are filled with allegories and analogies and things like that, so that might not always translate, but you want to give the best options possible. So that's part of that planning with that community. At Tech, we also have a few courses that are part of the digital accessibility track that we've been working with you guys about writing for effective translations, which will give you tools on how to translate content yourself, as well as translating caption videos. And we'll have Robert add to that as well.
Well, as Joseph had shared, with over 1,800 schools and 1.1 million students in New York City, you know that you're going to meet every dynamic in terms of families and even those who may be challenged in terms of hearing and visual impairments. So you want to make sure, as Joseph shared, to speak very slowly, so those who may have some audible concerns will be able to hear. Also, the diversity of our city, the diversity of our country, speaks to different languages. So be cognizant of those languages and those families who may need to participate in the ceremony and may not speak English as their first or dominant language.
Absolutely. So that's what the idea is when you have that team together of your parents. In fact, that's why you're bringing everyone in, because then you know what your community is. So you not necessarily have to translate to every language, but you know what the demographics make up your individual school and community. So the next is we're going to talk about setting the stage. So how about where are you broadcasting from? You may have seen different press conferences, such as our governor's press conference, where you have a physical dais, maybe from the school or an administrator's home. I do want to mention here that anything you do like this, you must and do it in a safe practice. You can absolutely broadcast with multiple people, like we are doing today, with safe social distancing. So is there a place that you can go together, or is this going to be a single person broadcasting out? So think about those things. So next is, who is organizing the content? We talked about that key team of members to plan, organize, and deliver, but this includes engineering and creating and organizing any of that pre-recorded material, from collecting it to editing it in your slides and video software. So then, Robert, I'll ask you, how are some ways that you think would be best to provide this information to your attendees and community?
Okay. Well, once again, when sharing information, it's very similar to what you currently do and what you've been doing for years. Of course, today we have certain platforms such as email. You can use your social media sites, your school website, newsletters, and any other way that you want to communicate to parents, including even robocalls. You want to get that information out there in a variety of formats, because, again, not every parent, every family will be able to use the same method for communicating or receiving those communications.
Absolutely. Multiple formats is key here. And you may be using some type of service already, School Messenger, Remind, however you've already effectively and kind of communicated out to your parents. That's why a parent coordinator is part of that team, because they usually are that channel to the families of your school. The last part of here is how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Make sure, don't do this for the first time live when you were doing anything. That's why you're reviewing the pre-recorded material. That's why you're doing dry runs and practices, making sure that you connect it from a device, have that team planned out. So you want to make sure that you do that. And that is one of my favorite jokes, if anyone's curious. Next, sorry. I'm going to go to my computer real quick. And I appreciate Lisa for the image for the event today, because I was looking for something like this, and this works out. So I know that I keep using the term graduation, but I'm just using that so I don't have to say graduation, moving up ceremonies and everything in every breath. So think about what your graduation program would look like. Design something digitally that, maybe has clicks to links out to the welcome messages and things like that. But what are parts of your program that you would want to cover in this event? And how could you replace them? Do you have to do everything? No, but you can do some things. We know that some things are obviously the most important, and we'll speak of that a little bit. So for example, I'm going to circle here awarding of diplomas. That's bold and bigger for a reason. So the commencement speech itself, we've already spoke about using pre-recorded, so use a pre-recorded software, using some kind of software. Set the stage and what you would want it to simulate for it to look like during a graduation. So Robert, I'll ask you that. So if you were to set the stage, what do you think you would make it look like?
Wow. Great question, and that could, again, be a variety of formats. First, I do want to impress upon the pre-recorded content. Our students can be unpredictable. Sometimes they'll take this opportunity to highlight something wonderful or maybe not so great. So pre-recording the content would be, in my opinion, the best option for you. It gives you the greatest amount of control over your ceremony and also what is actually presented. In terms of this format and the stage and the dais, and again, respecting social distancing is the most important factor. If you can do something together where people come in one large, and I'm not talking about your parents and all your students, I'm talking about those who would be presenting that day the awards or delivering speeches, where they can be appropriately socially distant from each other, that would be great. If not, I would create an environment in which follows the program, but students and your presenter speakers would be able to do that from their home environments. And that would keep everyone safe and also keep some continuity in terms of what you would like to see in your ceremony.
Yeah, and for that recorded speech, using something like a school emblem behind that's printed out, or curtains, or a flag, or whatever you want to do that. Make it look, set it. Use props out there. We have Robert today with his graduation gown on. Those are things we're talking about. Is like, do you have those available to make it look like you are providing that speech?
Yeah. I did just want to add to that, and thanks for bringing that up, Joseph. A consistent background would be important, free and clear from any type of debris or even photographs that are personal photographs. You don't want those things in your commencement speeches or in your background. Anything that would lead to someone even identifying other family members that you may not want seen. So if you don't have a flag or a banner that reflects either your school, then a blank wall would be best suited for that, and that way it would alleviate the pressure of having someone sit there and look at your pictures behind you, and the focus will be on the speaker, and it presents a continuous message throughout the program.
Excellent. And there's also the same concept for doing a live streaming speech. But I want to cover what Robert mentioned, is that speaker is alive during the broadcast. There's sometimes pressures of being live during a broadcast, having gaffes. Of course, doing usually commencement speeches are public speakers in front of people. I can tell you from experience, public speaking and speaking to a camera during an online broadcast are similar, not the same. So collecting your student names, and Robert, let's talk about the most important part. Let's talk about the most important part of the celebrations.
I would always impress this upon my principals. Parents, although we think they come to see us, they come to hear their students' name, their children's names actually be called. So this is the most important part of the ceremony, and I would focus the most time and attention in this area. Limit your speeches and other parts of the program, because parents are really there to celebrate their children and their success over whether it's 12 years or in their elementary school or middle school environment. So this is where you want to focus your time and attention, and how you do that becomes the challenge, because there are certain things, as Joseph had shared earlier, in terms of privacy rights, sharing photographs along with student names. So these are things that your committee will have to definitely consider. But this is the focus of your ceremony. It is the most important part of the ceremony, and this is why people are actually here.
So now think about that. What are things you're going to do? Are you going to create some kind of slideshow that includes each student? Are you going to have, want consistency using the same font styles, making a template slides, things like that? Using school photos that are potentially from the yearbook or family-provided photos. Make sure you give time for each student. Don't rush them. I know typically you always get that, save your applause to the end. Well, now applause as much as you want. No one can hear you. It's great. However, you're in with your family, you're watching, but don't rush it. You don't want to have a student slide be a second and a half each. You want to give that time, give that student that recognition for all the hard work they did. However, think about how long it is. You don't want it to be 5 minutes of slide time, 10 minutes of slide time, things like that. And just be mindful of what you send, who can access. Again, going back to that digital release form, and we'll speak a little bit more about the type of stuff that you would collect for this. So collecting pictures and videos for pre-recorded students. If you're doing that, I mentioned before, set some standards and parameters. Provide an example. How do you want them to send it in? Do they post to Google Classroom? What is your answer here? How are you collecting it? Is it collecting it via email? Are you putting a shared folder out there? Is that shared folder accessible to other people? You've got to think about how you're collecting it, giving clear instructions, and providing those examples. If you want them to take pictures, can you safely provide their graduation caps and gowns? Have they already been provided for other reasons? Maybe you have their school pictures for the yearbook, potentially graduation pictures already. Also, ask parents to turn in other photos. Send a concept of, if you don't have your graduation, a formal dress. A lot of students dress appropriately underneath the gown. So, maybe that's something that you're asked to. Maybe you're asking for something like baby pictures. That's always a popular, slideshow before and after, what you looked like in the district in your freshman year to your senior year, things like that. Using an avatar or a Bitmoji. So one, having someone created for you, so you creating each one for a student, suggesting maybe you don't want to collect pictures from students, but asking them to send in a Bitmoji, giving them a tool to do that. Robert mentioned earlier that a lot of our older students have digital footprints. They might have a Bitmoji already. Again, giving them the parameters of what you want to use. And that also might cover you in a lot of the consent forms. If you don't receive one, you can using an avatar, using a likeness, a silhouette, or things like that. Maybe have your students and your parents or your family design the slide. But again, give them the template. Hey, you're going to get 10 seconds. It's going to be 3 different slides, 1 different slide. It must have 2 pictures on it. We want a baby picture and an avatar, whatever it may be. You set those parameters, provide some samples, and then see what you can collect. But of course, have a plan for not just for students and families that do not turn in anything, but ones you have consent.
Just remember, the standard for most graduation ceremonies is uniformity in presentation. It looks great when all your students are dressed alike or dressed formally. It looks even more wonderful when they're in caps and gowns, particularly at the commencement level. If you could safely, as Joseph had shared, disseminate caps and gowns. Many students actually in schools order these things for their students, and if they could safely pick it up from the school, or if it could be delivered to the home environment, it would create the most uniform presentation in terms of a ceremony, and it helps students feel that they're actually participating in a graduation ceremony. So those things are important. If not, the uniformity in dress is important in terms of maybe the suits and something a little more formal. The last thing that you do want is a student that's just going to show up and not keep the dignity of the ceremony. And that's what we want to ensure, that there's dignity there, and that the format, the presentation is consistent to what would happen if they did not have a virtual graduation.
Potentially sending students home a placard to print, or a printed placard that they can hold up or laminated, or even something like a whiteboard that they drew themselves. Let yourself be creative in it. You possibly have arts or digital media classes and things in your school. Leverage those tools to provide something as backgrounds, backdrops, as well as something a student could just hold up in their picture, congratulating and creating that uniformity if you are not able to provide things like the caps and gowns. Excellent points. So, of course, another nice piece of it is your student speeches and tributes. So you may have the valedictorian speech, you may have student well wishes. Of course, these are the things that we've kind of said multiple times already of making sure that they are pre-recorded so there are no surprises. You just want to make sure that that's the case and using all those same tools we mentioned before. Maybe your school has some kind of performance. Maybe there's students that can record themselves singing for the procession music. There are apps like a cappella or other things that they can record in groups. Maybe you have a band or an orchestra recording from a prior event or last year's ceremony, things like that. Or even an individual student doing an individual instrument. There are plenty of ways to record. You may have staff members, faculty members, parents, or students with these talents. They may also be part of your program school. Again, that's celebrating everything that your school has done. And I've mentioned this one before. I just liked it, the whole idea of having students video themselves with a graduation cap toss. It may be one from an older sibling that they have, or if you are to provide it, just another option to do. So this is our second to last slide today is really just some related ideas. And I do mention again that if you in the chat box, you have other ideas, we'll read them out as we get into the Q&A portion. But I've heard some people, and I thank everyone that gave me those ideas last night at the GEG, website for student profiles or portfolios, a part of your school webpage honoring your graduates. I think that's great. 3D World for graduation simulation using something like Unity or Minecraft. I suspect there will be PDs about this coming up. That's a plug. A commencement podcast, you can record it. I've mentioned the iHeartRadio podcast before. You don't necessarily need to be video. Creating a digital ceremony program, so something that you're just going to link out to all those recorded videos and things like that, like almost like a choice board or something that you want to call this. If possible, this is not a virtual thing, but a car parade for your school. If your school is in an environment where parents can drive their cars, we have a physical day set up outside and they drive by and wave and things like that, you could always record that and post it out to the community. So of course, if you have those capabilities, we want to look at it. We've spoken all this and a lot of these things we talk about virtual proms. But one of my favorite ideas from last night that I heard is these breakout after parties. The importance we talked about. Robert mentioned the speaking to you, like you come to see they're coming to see their children. A lot of times the students are there to see each other and to celebrate together. So helping in the systems of organizing, you might have 100 people at the main thing, but then there's after parties, which are normal anyway, for other conferencing things. So just the students can be kids and talk to each other because they want to see their friends.
And also, this is something that is I've seen at a lot of graduation and even moving up ceremonies, a slideshow of a year in review, possibly of the class trips or things that may have happened earlier in the school year that could bring some sense of normalcy and a reminder to some of the things that they did that were fun and exciting up until the point where we had to move more into a virtual or remote learning environment. So those things like a year in review, slideshow, and also, again, today's technology, the challenges that we're seeing today on social media, those things are great for, as Joseph shared, the cap toss. That's something that students traditionally love to do at the high school level, even collegiate levels as well. The moving of the tassel from, right to left, a symbolism of, moving on and moving forward. Those are things that are, part of every commencement program that I participated in, and it's something that symbolizes now I'm leaving one era of my life and I'm moving forward. So if you can and have the opportunity to employ some of those types of things, it would be great. It would be fun to watch. Those challenges seem to be great. Students get excited over it. So employ some of the new technology that we have today and been using on social media to do some of the fun things at home and move that into your commencement speeches and ceremonies as well.
So the last thing I'll show you guys today before we get to the Q&A section is on your agenda. I have a whole bunch of resources. The link is to the link to this presentation. But don't forget to view the checklist for planning. There are a variety of other courses, such as the Microsoft graduation courses. There's one today at noon, and I believe tomorrow as well. But there are tons of PD on there, so you want to make sure that you're taking that so you can learn a lot of these tools. Don't forget about the translation and other services provided. And that's really what I have for you today. And what I'm going to ask is If Joe, if you have the questions, if you can read them out to me, it would be best. Or just open the door, however you guys think it's better. We'll just do it like this.
Okay, so can you discuss copyright issues with using commercial music?
Sure. So, of course, that is something that you would not want to use commercial music. That's why I suggested like student recording things, or there are websites that you can get copyright-free music, such as a Dig CC Mixter and things like that, where there are artists that will create beats and other things like that that are used for public consumption and education. I would not suggest broadcasting with copyrighted music.
I would also stick to your traditional pomp and circumstance. That's something that I'm sure you can use without having any copyright infringements, as well as your student performances throughout the year, earlier in the year. If you have any videos of that, I would use that in place of using some of the music that might be a concern for that is copywritten.
Excellent. Joe, what else do you have for me?
All right, so I have one here. Would it be smart to use Microsoft Teams and just share your screen of pre-recorded videos to the parents and school community, or would it be better for staff to present when they are talking?
So that really is how you want to ultimately do it. So one, you think about Microsoft Teams is that you do have some limitations of what you can go back. I would not use Microsoft Teams by itself. I would use Microsoft Teams Live, the live event features, which are going to be covered in the Microsoft courses later. If I think it's better to do something pre-recorded, but maybe have a moderator that comes on camera every once in a while, again, you're going to practice and figure out what's best for you.
All right, next one here. Are there any suggestions for physical diploma distributions, perhaps in groups by alphabetical order, or something that's still safe and compliant with social distancing?
So that's something that I know Robert and I have talked about. Yeah. First and foremost, safe. Making sure that when you're providing things, they're wiped down and things of that nature. Doing something with a card parade, you can do that, and setting time slots. Maybe, students with last names A to G come between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. Pickup times. Absolutely. So I do, and you could record those moments of handing it out or things like that. Maybe there's your STEAM engineering team designed a robot to pass out the diploma, or putting it out. I played lacrosse in college, so putting it on a lacrosse stick to pass it out, or, however you can kind of explain that. I think people might have seen videos and things of like fast food restaurants putting things on a tray to push the tray out to people so that there's an option. Mm-hmm. So absolutely something you do. Just remember, safe.
And I would like to just add to that as well, a PDF copy of the diploma, if you want something more in the short term or more immediate for the students to have, something you can send out ahead of time. But as Joseph said, safety is the concern here, and mailing out the diploma probably would be best for your students, and that way you would ensure that they're safe. Every student gets a copy of his or her diploma without having to compromise their health or the health and safety of their family members.
All right, so we have a question here, a few about Zoom, and if Zoom is an option at all here.
So I did not really do a lot of exploring into Zoom because I do not believe Zoom has live streaming capabilities. However, that is something that we were talking about before the session today that we're going to explore. But remember, when I talked about what you need in a streaming platform, you need something that's one-way audio and video. You do not want participants to be able to share their screen. You do not want participants to be able to unmute themselves. So we had that today, and we, of course, will let people talk and suppose something towards the end. But if you're having 100, 200, 1,000 people come to an event, you cannot manage that muting. So I do not know if Zoom has one-way streaming options. However, that's something that we will explore as well. I do suggest exploring yourself.
Okay, so I have one about streaming on YouTube. So if we use a private streaming service like YouTube that is password protected, do we need media release forms for all the students?
You need a media release form, period. Yes, period. No matter how you do it.
That is correct. You do not want to share any student images without having consent from the parent or guardian. It's very important, particularly, again, anyone that's under the age of 18 You don't want their identity compromised at all. We don't want our identity compromised for anyone, but definitely for our younger students in particular, where their names and photos may be associated together. So these are things that parents need to consent to say, I allow for this to happen, no matter what platform that you're using, whether it's with news media, social media, streaming videos. It's imperative that you get that consent.
Okay, so we are doing a slideshow, but it's lengthy. What is the best way to share this with students? YouTube is not an option. I was thinking Vimeo, but is there another way?
Vimeo is an option. If this slideshow is created in PowerPoint and Office 365 could be a published link, as well as if you're doing Google Slides, you could do it as a published link that goes through the slideshow. Those are two options I would look at, and there are plenty of. You can even kind of bring those slideshows into, post it to Google to have a link to it. If it's a video that you created, turn that video into an MP4. There's a lot of services that do that. I do like the public on a web option that Google Slides or PowerPoint provides, because then you don't have to have a third party like Vimeo involved.
I have two similar questions here, and I think maybe the DOE people might be able to help us out more. One user asked if there's a template for the digital New York City DOE media consent form, and then in the worst case scenario, if they don't receive the consent form from the parent, can they use the yearbook senior picture for the presentation?
So for the first question, there is no digital form. I do have in the agenda the media consent form in general. That's a PDF. You would have to turn that into a digital way. But the second part of the answer, that would be a question for someone part of the EdTech team or DIT. If someone could jump in and answer that, I would not be sure of that answer.
We have another question about copyright issues. If their students perform to popular music, are they going to run into copyright issues with that, like say for a dance?
So again, that if it's the original recording and it's something that's copyrighted, that's something that I would not use. If it's a recording that is public, free to use, of course you can do that in obviously normally popular or music like that. But then some popular music might be so old because there are lengths to when those are able to be used. So it really depends on the rights of that individual song. If the students are performing the music themselves via instruments and things like that, again, you should probably check into it. I do believe that would be okay.
We have one here, still on the consent forms. If we already have photo video consent that we received from students while in our buildings, do we have to obtain new ones?
Absolutely. That's what you should use. If you've already had things for your school's website or events or things like that, you could totally use that. You just want to make sure that your media consent form does cover the things that you're going to do. So most media consent forms cover likeness and video and audio recording and pictures. If for some reason your media consent form is only still images, do not do videos. But most likely the media consent form that you've been using covers all the bases already.
Okay, we have one about younger kids. What do you suggest is the best way to maybe do a pre-K step-up ceremony?
I think pre-recorded is very important. I think especially with your young kids, using likenesses like avatars or bitmojis to create these slideshow videos and things like that. I also may not do it as a scheduled time. I would create that slideshow and push it out so that parent can watch it with that student on their own time, because sometimes schedules might not match up, and you could always broadcast it live for people to come at a certain time and share it out. But again, I would, especially with the more younger students, I would shy away from pictures or videos of them and go much more to the avatar style.
Okay, we just have a couple more. This one asks if we advise getting help from companies that have virtual graduation packages, or should schools plan their own virtual graduations?
Ultimately, that would be up to you. I would not advise either way. I'm sure there are companies that are providing resources. I've seen a lot of free resources out there that I would suggest to look over, review. Ultimately, you should take ownership. So I'm not going to advise on that anyway, but I do think that you should take ownership.
Okay. One here. In our live ceremonies for graduating fifth graders, they share live to the audience for 1 minute, doing like a talent show kind of thing. How would you best capture or present this as now pre-recorded content for families to view and explore?
So there's a couple of ways you can do this, and I do like that in general of the talent show. You could have each student pre-record what they're doing on, a cell phone and turn it in, that you turn into one long video, or potentially creating one of that like a, student student digital portfolio or website where maybe there's the profile for each student, they could watch things separately. So I think it might be better for the end user to be able to have things separated out. So I have a choice of 5 videos to watch for the 5 talents. Of course, there could be more than 5. Then having as one long video, or maybe even in parts of some way. I think that's a great suggestion.
Great. Yeah, the questions seem to be dying down a little bit here. We have one who's been trying to record her class singing a song and wants to know about getting a grid view on Google Meets or Zoom, if we have any suggestions.
So ultimately with things like that, it is difficult because even if you have a grid view, there is a grid view extension for Google Meets, for example, your bandwidth might not, be all in line. So while you think you're singing at the same time, and I know that harmony is important, it may not record out that way. There are other things, like there's an app called Acapella that allow people to record and harmonize and bring and stitch together. It is possible. You could try it, but do be mindful that that might not 100% work. And recording your stream would do that. So, Zoom does have recording and grid view options, and Google Meet has the Meet extension that you would need to add.
All right, so we have one more about consent here. The media consent forms doesn't negate COPA rules about posting last names and personal info. Should we consider posting only first names, last initial?
You should absolutely consider that. And again, that's stuff that you might want to get guidance from the district and things like that. But, we spoke about it ourselves a few times, even with the consent form, be mindful of what you're sharing. Just because you have a consent doesn't mean you should be sharing everything.
Do you have any suggestions for breakout after party?
There's a lot of ways to do that. Some kind of schedule, maybe there's a spreadsheet or a part of a newsletter or a website where you have, here are the 5 breakout places that you can go, different organized Google Meets, Zoom Hangouts, whatever you're using already for that, for students to go there. Maybe you break them up by grade, by, students can choose. So hey, here's the 5 that you can go to. You pick the one, or people register for it, and then tell them, hey, talk to your friends. Which ones are you going to go to? And there's also no problem to bounce around to more than one if you'd like.
Here's one. They want to be able to live stream their graduation, have students see each other, but not have any disruptions such as unmuting themselves and having a chat box. Any ideas?
I think that would be very difficult. And I know I'm answering a lot of these off the top of my head, so I appreciate you guys, working with me. I can't think of anything that would make that work. I'm going to look over to the video team. Maybe they'll. So the question was the ability to see all of our students be able to see each other while we're live streaming and recording, but not allowing them to interrupt and talk over. I don't think. Yeah, a moderator would have to control that. I don't think it would be very easy. They'd have to keep doing one button to go through. You can reach out to us and we can try to help you with options if you'd like. I think that one would be a little difficult.
We have one more here. Remote graduation is not like the actual graduation. How can administration make remote graduation exciting and meaningful? I'll speak a little bit. I'm sure Robert will as well. Really, that's what trying to bring that integrity in, making it different. And, honestly, to me, doing something is important. And I do think this will be memorable regardless because of lots of reasons, especially if it's something that they can take home with them. I think very rarely are you able to take a recording home of the graduation. And now you have this, as well as how you were able to contribute. Very few times students are able to, every student's able to create their own slide or pick their own picture or give their own well wish and things like that.
And I have to agree with Joseph. It is different, but also it can be exciting. I want to go back to a lot of the challenges that we have out on social media today. You have things like the dance challenge, and you have things like, they switch up the clothing, but you can make it exciting for the students to get involved and to participate in by, creating these opportunities for them to have videos that they can actually put together, whether it's with their friends, again, social distancing remotely, maybe pictures that they've had over the school year or maybe over the course of their academic career with certain friends, families getting together, maybe creating videos together. We did something very unique here the other day for a member of our staff for their birthday, and everyone in their respective homes wrote a nice little message on a sign and held it up to the camera, and then they threw it and tossed it to the next person. and we created a whole collage of videos together to celebrate someone's birthday. You can do something very similar for the graduation. The cap toss, tossing it up, and maybe a kid catching it and then tossing it up again. And so I think it's limitless. You can go on or unlimited, your opportunities. To create this something that's dynamic, something that's fun. Involve your students, particularly again at the senior level, the high school level. They would probably have some great ideas of their own. I do just want to impress upon, I know a lot of us do want to have something that might be live, and I always caution just think about pre-recording, because you have the best sense of control over something that you can pre-record and edit. And you can actually plan for those unpredictable moments in a graduation program. I've had them myself. The student that comes up and has just on the graduation robe and nothing else. I had to plan for those things and ahead of time. With a virtual graduation that's live, it's kind of hard to keep those things under wraps. So just think about the pre-recorded. It's up to you. The options are yours. You know your students, you know your families best, but I always try to plan for the unpredictable, and I think that might be best.
All right, we have one more question, and then we're going to wrap up.
So you mentioned in the presentation about doing a virtual prom. In your opinion, what platform would be the best for hosting a school prom, especially considering things like accommodations and privacy, etc.?
So any type of meet, to me, any type of meet that you've been using, either Google Meet, Zoom, or Microsoft Teams, that is in that privacy within the domain, that is the option that I would go with. You could, again, do where there's like maybe a main prom room with a certain music that's being played and shared out, but then multiple other breakout rooms that are, of course, moderated by adults or staff members. But again, letting kids be kids and talking to each other and things like that. So there's a variety of ways to do that. I would stick with what you're doing for your individual class meetings as a school and things like that, because that would students already know how to get in, and you already have that privacy of just, random people not coming into the meet and things like that. And of course, that all matters on your overall settings of things like your Google admin dashboard and how you provide the links for things like Zoom, etc. So there are lots of options there, and that's how I would go about it. So thank you, everyone. We'll hang out in the chat box for a few minutes. Thank you to Robert for helping us today. Thank you for Joe, and I know he's not on camera, and helping, and Brian and Marcello doing the videos. We had a lot going on today, so we appreciate all of that. Until next time, everyone be safe, be healthy. If you have any questions, feel free. Our information is in the agenda, etc. As always, my name is Joseph Sanfilippo, and good night, Internet.